In the Mesa Country, 30 miles north of Tucumcari, New Mexico, in what some might call the middle of nowhere, is a 70-year-old project that has had a lasting impact on the history of the state. Here, in what is still considered excellent ranch land, is a great big beautiful lake, offering all the amenities of freshwater recreation and a source of water for irrigated farming in the Tucumcari area. It took a number of New Deal government agencies, the Army Corps of Engineers, and 2,500 workers from 1935 to 1939 to build what made this beautiful lake possible, Conchas Dam. This is a story about success in desperate times. It's the kind of story we all like to hear. It's about building a structure that will last hundreds of years, putting able-bodied people to work, changing the face of the earth for the betterment of all mankind, and making a barren, drought-stricken land bring forth beautiful crops. In the early part of the 20th century, the state of New Mexico was in serious economic trouble many years before the stock market crash of 1929.
Well, you couldn't sell anything, you couldn't buy anything. You lived by trading and just what you could do.
Wages were down low. I worked anywhere from 50 cents an hour to 50 cents a day.
A severe drought and a slump in agricultural production had left the state with more than 50% unemployment.
A lot of people were on welfare, eating, getting their groceries, commodities from welfare, and things were just pretty rough.
I had a good broom corn crop, but I couldn't sell the broom corn. I went down to the store and I said, hey, I can't sell the broom corn. What am I going to do? And we needed to put some meat up for there, and he had one of the old tin can sealers and a cooker and stuff. He said, I'll trade you that 100 cans and the sealer and stuff for a ton of broom corn. I'll hold him down a ton of broom corn. This was at the Bard store.
Building this dam at the confluence of the Conchas and the Canadian rivers was being discussed in the early 1930s, but there were a number of political and financial obstacles to be overcome, not the least of which was this structure's whopping, for the times, $11 million price tag. However, in 1934, New Mexico had elected this man, Clyde Tingley, as governor. An avid New Deal supporter, on October 1st, 1935, he had a conversation with Franklin Delano Roosevelt in his private railroad car while both men were on their way to the dedication of this dam, Boulder Dam, now called Hoover Dam, and the rest is history.
When the engineers was finding these places to do this, well, when they seen where the Conchas and the Canadian run together in this big dip, they said, here's where we're going to build a dam. But they did not say what kind. It could be a dirt fill, it could have been anything. And until in 34, when I was up there and they found out it had the rocks foundation down approximately 40 foot under riverbed of solid sand rock, that they could set the dam on. Then they set the dam on there.
It's the oldest, in fact, it's one of the oldest for the Corps of Engineers. It was completed in 1939, and that was sort of the birthplace of the Albuquerque district.
July 29th, 1935, Congress authorized the Tucumcari district, originally called Tucumcari District, to construct a dam just outside of Tucumcari on the Canadian and Conchas River.
One of the ways concrete dams are built is in a fashion known as monoliths. Now the word monolith, the word mono means one, lith means stone. so you have one stone. If you see pictures of the construction of the dam, you'll see that they were built in almost like stair steps and one portion of it at a time. And each one of those is a monolith. Well, there are 29 monoliths in Conchus Dam. You're currently standing in monolith 15. I'm currently standing in monolith 16. The reason for building concrete dams in monolithic structures like that is that if there were a problem with the dam, if there were a crack in concrete, it would be isolated to just that one monolith, that one location. It would not infect the entire integrity of the dam. And it could be sealed, it could be dealt with in that one location. And then you would not have the whole dam being compromised by one little crack or situation. So that's the process of building dams in monoliths. Now you see these lines, each level here is called a lift. When the dam was being built, there was a concrete mixing batching plant up on the south bank there. Big, huge towers and lines that came across from north to south with these big, large buckets of concrete. Took 2 men to pull the handle, pull it down, and each one of those lifts, each one of those concrete bucket loads that went up to a certain level was called a lift. The way they did that was with pretty much the same way you build a little curb around your sidewalk or your driveway. You set up a form out of wood, 2x4s, whatever, and you set up a wooden form and you fill it in with the concrete. It's the same way they built the dam. They had the forms, they filled it in. Once that cooled, it took 7 to 10 days to cool. After that, they could pour up to the next lift by raising the forms and continuing on. So that's how dams are built. And one of the things we like to do in here, if you've ever taken a trip to Carlsbad Caverns and you've ever realized how dark something could be, we like to do this too. A voice in the dark.
The New Deal was nothing but the other money, welfare money, changed in where you traded your work for the money you got. That was the New Deal. It made you feel better to have them 4 quarters in your pocket for a day's work and know you earned it than it was for them to give it to you.
Jackhammer John was a jackhammer man, born with a jackhammer in his hand. Lord, Lord, and he had them jackhammer blues. I built your roads and your buildings too, and I'm gonna build a dam or two. Lord, Lord, well, I got them jackhammer blues. I was born in Portland town, I built every port from Alaska down. Lord, Lord, I got them jackhammer blues. Built your bridges, dug your mines, been in jail 1,000 times. Lord, Lord, I got them jackhammer blues. Jackhammer, jackhammer, where you been? I've been out chasing them gals again. Lord, Lord, I got them jackhammer blues. Jackhammer man from a jackhammer town, I can hammer on the hammer till the sun goes down. Lord, Lord, I got them jackhammer blues. Hammered on the Boulder, hammered on the Butte, Columbia River on a 5-mile shoot. Lord, Lord, I got them jackhammer blues. Working on the Bonneville, hammered all night, trying to bring the people some electric light. Lord, Lord, I got them jackhammer blues. Hammered on the Bonneville, cool it too, and always broke when the job was through. Lord, Lord, I got them jackhammer blues. Hammered on the river from the sun to sun, and 15 million salmon run. Lord, Lord, I got them jackhammer blues. Hammered in the rain, I hammered in the dust, I hammered in the best, and I hammered in the worst. Lord, Lord, I got them jackhammer blues. Got a jackhammer gal as sweet as pie, and I'm gonna hammer till the day I die. Lord, Lord, I got them jackhammer blues.
You can't just put 2,500 people to work on a project that is 30 miles from the nearest town or railroad without giving them a place to live. At first, that was a tent city at the site, but soon, work was started on more permanent structures.
The captain was always used to lumber, and he didn't know what he was going to do, shipping in enough lumber to build barracks for 2,000 people, town of everything. And one of the guys that was there from Santa Fe, or maybe more than one, told him, he said, why don't we build it like us Spanish people does, out of adobe and rock? Well, the rock sounded all right to him. So he started some of them building, and they built a few houses out of rock, but it was too slow and too expensive. So the WPA Public Work Program said, we want people put to work. We don't want machinery and stuff much. So when they mentioned adobes, he said, well, he'd go see. So they took him somewhere, I don't know. Some people said Santa Fe, I say Las Vegas. They looked at some of the architect work and stuff that was done with adobe brick. And he come back convinced to build the town out of adobe.
During the construction, they built a hospital. They had doctors and nurses in that hospital. They built the district office and the town hall, which was the housing and utilities office, post office, police department, and down the street was the church.
They built adobes by the millions, and it shows yet.
Well, they didn't build quite 1 billion adobe bricks, but they did make hundreds of thousands of them. The idea was to put people to work, and adobe brick making is labor intensive. In fact, the Army Corps cinematographers did such a good job of recording the brick building, it could be used today to teach people the process. Just like the Hebrew slaves in Egypt, you simply take dirt containing clay, mix in straw, put the mixture in forms, dry them in the sun, and you're ready to make buildings. Good buildings that are well insulated and comfortable to live in. Not only were these workers building homes to live in until the project was completed, they were getting a kind of fringe benefit. They were learning. Most of them came from farms in eastern New Mexico or West Texas. They had no work because they had no skills. The Army Corps gathered a few skilled workers who in turn passed on their knowledge and skill to hundreds. In the housing project alone, laborers learned to make forms, to cut window frames, shim up doors, put finish on wood floors, and to mix mortar and lay blocks. These workers came to get a few dollars a week to keep their families alive. They left with much more. There's an old proverb that says if you give a man a fish, he can eat for a day. If you teach him how to fish, he can feed himself for a lifetime. These workers were learning how to fish, so to speak. They were also learning how to deal with adversity. Builders of the Conchas Dam faced many problems, not the least of which was getting the heavy equipment moved 30 miles from the railroad to the site.
The shovels and the stuff, we couldn't haul them. We didn't have trucks to haul them on, the good-sized par shovels that we used up there, so we had to walk them out there. And they were something that people right now wouldn't know how to get out there, because your helper had to lock one track for you, and you'd back up and make it turn the way you would line it up. Then you'd go that way till you had to change it. Then he'd have to lock it, and you'd either pull forward or backward to line your track, and then you'd walk again. You couldn't lock your tracks from inside the cab.
With a project as big as the building of Conchas Dam, The workers were not the only ones who had lessons to learn. In the spring of 1937, something unusual happened in the Mesa country of eastern New Mexico. It rained. A lot.
I had talked to the captain quite a bit and other people about the fast water we had. They were used to Mississippi water. They could wait anything like a railroad track or anything. They'd run a train out on it to hold the ties and stuff on it and let the water on the Mississippi just come up around it. And when the flood left, they still had a track. And of course, it really was raining, and I had been over on the north side working, and I couldn't get my car back across, but I come across on the tram line, and I hadn't been home but just a little while, and I got one of the chauffeurs come down. We called them chauffeurs. Everything, we didn't have telephones or radios or nothing. If you wanted somebody, you sent a chauffeur after it, just because they had a pickup they could drive. Well, they was messenger boys. They come down and said, this was on the weekend, they said the captain wants to see you. And I jumped in, we went back up there, and he said the floodwaters is coming down, and our little bridge down there, I want you to put a truck with a load of rock on it to hold the wood bridge down on top of the piers. I said, Captain, if it hits it, it'll take it downstream. Oh no, he said, we do it all the time. It'll hold it. We may lose some of the buttman, but we can keep our bridge. So I went and started up at Parshell and took a Ford truck. I loaded it plumb full of rock. I mean, as heavy as I could. Of course, it wasn't a big truck, but the heaviest one we had handy. I drove it out on the bridge and got off, and we was standing up there, and they said, well, that big water that's coming down. Now, they had, up the Canadian River and the Conchas both, they had signals that sent out I guess you'd call it SOS signal when the water got so high and stuff. I don't know just how they worked, but anyhow, the main office could kind of keep track of flood water coming down. They went plumb up the other side of Springer on the Canadian River. Anyhow, they said that headwaters are coming. And the picture I got here doesn't show the headwater when it hit. It shows it after, kind of. It come down in, I'd say, around 6 to 8, just rolling like a wheel down the water. When it hit where our little bridge was, the truck, top and all, went rolling with it, right down stream. And they did go down and salvage the tires off the truck. The rest of it is somewhere down there yet, I expect. Maybe somebody's took it out, some of the old ranchers or something salvaged it, I don't know, but the engineers did not. And the captain turned around at me and says, that's one for you. And that was all I ever said about it. The captain, or through other, they told me what they wanted done, but they didn't tell me how to do it.
At its highest, the water washed out the forms and construction inside the Coffer Dam area. And with the bridge gone, the only way to cross the river was on the tram. However, the weather in New Mexico is as diverse as the population, and the spring rains became spring sandstorms, causing another type of problem for the dam builders.
This happened in a dust storm, and the roads crossed each other. Of course, no stop line, they just work roads. And Neither one of them seen the other, and they just naturally one of them run over the other one. But nobody was hurt.
Unfortunately, I think we lost 2 employees during the construction of the dam itself. And I think we lost one on the road from Newkirk to Conscious. It was a gravel road. There was no paving at that time. And Captain Kramer had set out an order that anybody caught driving drunk on that road would be automatically fired. And he kept his word. And I think there was 2 or 3 that got the axe for driving drunk on that road.
Captain Hans Kramer, by the way, was the man appointed by the Army Corps of Engineers to head up the Conscious project. He went on to become a general, and if you listen to his former employees, the reason for that is obvious.
He was one of the finest men I ever worked for.
The job was a great success as far as I was concerned. I was very impressed with the district engineer, Hans Kramer, Captain Hans Kramer, who was a very honest, hard-working individual and expected a day's work for a day's pay. And you could consult with him at any time if you had a problem. And he was good to me, and he looked after his people.
They got in a whole carload of cane bottom chairs, and they had stacked them plumb to the ceiling in that warehouse. Well, I got orders to take a little electric iron and get it red hot and stamp USED on every one of them chairs. They were stacked just one on top of the other plumb to the ceiling. I was walking back and letting them down. I'd already worked several and paying no attention to nothing, only what I was doing, looking up, and I stepped on somebody's toe. He jerked his foot out. We had chairs everywhere. And I turned loose with a few words we're not going to use on TV. And about him being in the way, and he didn't say a thing. He just turned and walked out the door. As soon as he got out the door, the guy that's in the front of the warehouse there, he come running back, kind of the bookkeeper. He said, "Flint, do you know what you done?" I said, "No." He said, "You sure played hell." I said, "Why?" He said, "That's Captain Kramer you just cussed out." I said, "I don't care who he was. He ought to have been watching what he was doing, not getting the man's way." Well, found out afterwards, after I got to know the captain, he just walked out the warehouse door and stopped to light his old cigar. And he heard what I said back then. So that's the way I met the captain.
With the challenge of building housing for the workers and their families met, it was time for Kramer and the other engineers working for the Army Corps to get started on the project in earnest, the building of a mammoth dam in a very remote area in New Mexico.
Now the dam itself, 150 feet long. What that means is if you took Conscious Dam, you put it up on its side, it would be just as tall as the Empire State Building is in New York. There's 836,000 cubic feet of concrete in the dam, and that would mean that there was just enough concrete there to maybe build 2 Pentagon buildings and a sidewalk around them. So it's a lot of concrete.
It is a weight dam, and it's built, the weight of it, and the brace down here. It's straight up and down on the upstream and tapers on the other. The water pressure is not near great enough to tip it.
Now here's some of the equipment that was actually built in the dam. You can actually see on the wall where it tells people where they were, the internal concrete temperature plugs. And then over here onto your right-hand side, the joint meter. You see these panels actually built into the dam, included wiring put into the monoliths, into the concrete, and these plugs were all sensor units, a big, huge piece of equipment. In those days, that was the size of them. Today, it'd probably be about the size of a wallet to do that. But the wires went to each one of these plugs into its separate designation area, and in this particular panel, they were able to measure the temperature of the concrete as it was cooling, to make sure it was cooling fine, that there wasn't any problems with that. Now again, it takes concrete 7 to 10 days to cool and form when it's after it's being poured. So you imagine in a large structure like this, they needed to know how long that was going to even be for the whole structure, not just each particular lift or monolith. Now the joint meter, again, that was another sensor unit that was placed on the joints in between the monoliths to measure any kind of movement, action, anything that was taking place during the settlement of the dam. We wanted to make sure all the concrete was settling properly, and it was all cooling properly, and that everything was going to be just fine when it was all done. That was the purpose for all this equipment being done, placed into the dam, even as it was being constructed, so that it could be tested and monitored as it cooled.
That's a load of cement. They've got a air machine in here that runs. It blows the cement up in here. Then our cement trucks, they got 50-barrel tanks on them. Drive under and you load it. Here's a little bucket. It brings in the sand and the gravel and dumps it in here, and it goes into a right bin down here. Each bunch is separated. The weighing scales is in here, and then the mixing plant is right there. The buckets that filled with cement is on a track and comes in under there, and they come out here to where the tail tower can pick it up. There's double track there.
What powered the mixing part? Was that electric?
All electric, everything electric.
Everything was electric.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We had a tail tower put up, and it was off from the north side of the dam about, I'd say around 100 yards from where the pour was. The tail towers, or the head towers, was tied to that tail tower with a big heavy load cable. These two head towers was on a circumference exactly the same on railroad tracks, that they could move around, up and back, the two of them, to where they are in the circle, to where they could pour cement anywhere where they wanted to the dam. One of them would pick it up and he'd move out, and the other would be a pouring over here, and then move back, and his here could pour there, and they kept the two buckets going. Now, they had one endless cable that taken the bucket load bracket out, which was tied, you might say, the two ends together. It could take it out, and your bucket cable, they were both on the same size drums, and when you picked up a load, we take it out straight over where he's going to unload it, and let the bucket then straight down. And these cables, and going out, they had guards on them that about every 50 foot, this top cable would take one of them off, and they spread them out as they go out. As they came back in, they'd pick them back up. If they didn't do that, when you unloaded, the cables was liable to roll.
What the tram amounted to over the dam site was a skyhook that could move impressive amounts of weight over a very limited area, but an engineering marvel of the 1930s nonetheless. After the flood and during the dust storms, the dam builders made steady progress. One by one, the 29 monoliths were finished and took their place in the structure. At some points, it looked like the pyramids in Egypt were being moved there, piece by piece. Progress was being made at the same time on the north and south dikes. The dikes are designed to stop some water and let some pass through, with a combination of impervious and pervious material. The man rocks, placed by hand, look very much today as they did 70 years ago when they were put there. The last part of the project to be finished was the emergency spillway on the north side of the structure. Even though it's a long way from the water, studies predict that this measure will be needed at least once every 400 years. The dam also features a tunnel under the south dike to allow water to be released into a canal that carries it south to irrigated farmland in Tucumcari during years when the level of the lake is high enough.
Okay, you see along the stairway as we were coming down, you could actually see the water running down the stairs there in a little gutter along the side. And it collects into this point and it goes into where you see it dripping right here. And inside there is one of those pump assemblies that I was talking about that sends the water up to the grouting, or rather up to the operating gallery, and it pumps it outside the dam. You see there is a lot of moisture down here, a lot of water. We are below the level of the lake right now. We are below the bottom of the lake, and this is just normal seepage. Okay, this is an item in the grouting gallery. Again, the reason why it's called a grouting gallery is because it provides access for grouting into the foundation below the dam if necessary. This is one of the access points enabled to do that. This is called a calyx hole. 30-inch core samples were drilled out of this hole. You can still see the handles on the side here, and even up above you where the equipment was connected to drill this out. Up until a few years back, they even used to put a man down this hole just to check the foundation. You know, looking for cracks, leaks, any type of unusual seepage. Since then, we don't do that anymore. We could if we needed to. It is filled up with seepage water. And so we maintain a gauge to measure the amount of water that's collected in there and the pressure behind it. Coming up from downstairs, from the pump, the water being pumped up from the grouting gallery and through the pipe into the gutters and out the drain holes. Almost sounds like there is some actually running at this point. And what you see here are the operating gates. This is, again, why it's called the operating gallery of Conchas Dam. There are 6 operating gates, what are known as sluicing gates. Big, huge penstocks are running in through the dam where the water comes in when these gates are opened hydraulically. Just like opening a curtain, as the hydraulics lift them, up on the top you can see kind of like a little cone shape. It goes up into that receiver. That would be when the gate would be fully open. Now, how do we know how high or how low to open the gates in order to let out so much water? Now, these gates can let out 8,100 cubic feet per second of water. Now, what is a cubic foot of water, per second even of water? It's about the size of a basketball. So if you had a cubic foot of water, you'd have about just one size of a basketball. If you toss that, you can figure that would be 1 cubic foot per second. Now, 8,100 cubic feet per second, 8,100 basketballs per second could come through these gates and be deposited out into the Stilling Basin and down the South Canadian River. The spillway outside has a total maximum of up to 182,000 cubic feet per second that can flow over those at the maximum level of 4,230 elevation. Purpose of the gates is that, again, to protect the integrity of the dam. You've got a whole lot of water pressure behind the dam when the level is high. You've got water going over the dam when it's high. Then you're going to start affecting the structure of the dam itself. That's when we would open the gates, release the water, and we would release that pressure. There are 6 sluicing gates in Conchas Dam. 3 of them are service, 3 of them are emergency. If the service gate failed, the emergency gate could be opened. There is an unlikely event that there's a serious amount of water, 200-year flood, what have you. We could open both gates and have all 6 gates open at the same time with water rushing out. The only time that I know that this was a significant event that took place was in 1942. The first time water spilled over the dam was in 1941, just 2 years after it was completed. The following year, 1942, it was at flood stage. Water was coming over the dam at 170,000 cubic feet per second, 170,000 basketballs per second, plus all 6 gates were open at the same time. So there was a lot of water going over and through Conchas Dam at that time. Now what happened then, and it hasn't happened since, and it really surprised them, was that because that water was going so fast over the dam, it was splashing back into those drain holes that we saw outside. And those drain holes, with the water splashing back into them, filled up these gutters that we saw along the gallery. And we could see pictures from in the past where they had sandbags in the gallery here, and that was a great concern for them at that time because they were thinking that the dam could fall apart. There was water inside of it. But eventually that water was pumped out just like it is today, and that situation hasn't happened since. It was not a critical situation to begin with. Now, when I was talking about downstairs, how we were concerned about the water seeping up underneath the foundation of the dam, one of the places that we need to monitor that is at the upper lift pressure pipes. We simply take these off. We have a big long ruler, metal ruler that we stick down there and measure the level of the water that's in there. Actually, some of these pipes have gauges on them to measure the pressure. You see, we've even written a little gauge on the top here to determine how much and how far is okay. These are what's called piezometer readings. We want to make sure that the level of the water is at an adequate level. It's not too much. Again, because it could cause that situation called uplift on the foundation on the dam. We don't want to have that taking place. Now, you see over here, as we're over by the gates again, these are the hydraulic lines coming from the tank, being pumped by the new pump you'll see further down here. You got a big inlet line and you got a big outlet line of the hydraulic fluid that comes in, runs all along the operating gallery here and operates all these gates. This is one of my favorite stops. Too bad we don't have any children with us because they love to be able to show how strong they are. 95-year-old Earl Flint, one of the dam builders, picked this thing up and was holding it with one hand. He was pretty proud of that fact too. If you see our interpretive video in the visitor center, it talks about you could see the tools that built the dam. Well, these are not the tools that built the dam. These are the tools that maintain the dam. If you noticed up on the gates and some of this other, well, this is heavy. Gotta give credit to Earl for holding that. If you notice up on the gates, we got some pretty big bolts on those items. And if we needed to do any repairs, if we needed to do any maintenance, we're gonna need some really big tools to do those with. That's basically what these tools are here for. Some of them you can see we hardly ever use. Others you can see we use quite frequently. There's a little bit dirty there as compared to some of the others. Some of them are huge in comparison in size as to maybe just a regular wrench that you would see in somebody's toolbox. There's a lot of minerals in the water here at Conchas Lake, and you may have noticed a little bit of that in the smell down in the grounding gallery. I had one little girl at one time say, as soon as we went down there, it smells like Grandpa in here. And I was a little concerned because it was a little bit of a sulfur smell, and I had to wonder what Grandpa was eating that day. One of the things that I think is interesting throughout the dam here, you may have seen that we have some telephones on the wall. This is just a little old telephone station. And it's a dial telephone, which I consider to be kind of antique at this point. Although Earl Flint didn't think so, he says he has one in his house.
When the dam was finished, all pouring was done, and the tearing down started in one way or another. The captain was going to be transferred to Canal Zone, Panama Canal. He was determined I was going with him. I was determined I wasn't. So we got Well, we just didn't argue about it. That's just the way it was.
I stayed there for two years in that position, and later was assigned to the hydrology section of the engineering division, the Corps of Engineers in Albuquerque.
The draft board come along and sent me to Boeing, Wichita when the war broke out. And I worked at Boeing, Wichita until VJ Day and come back down this way and finally ended up buying the San Juan Auto Parts and running it for about 35, 40 years.
From design to completion, the Conchas Dam project took almost 5 years. The builders learned that a dam is not just a large pile of cement blocks, it has a job to do. It makes a lake. In this case, a big lake, stretching for miles up the Conchas and Canadian rivers. Sooner or later, when you stop up a river and make a lake, people are going to come to see it. And once they see it, they want to do something else. They want to play in the water.
The folks that designed and built it really didn't visualize or realize what type of recreation demand there would be in the years to come. And in fact, we actually, as an agency, divided up little lots for people to come and encourage them to build fisherman cabins so that we were trying to get them to come out and spend their money in the local community.
I grew up with a young man that we first met when we were in 8th grade, and he was from Tucumcari, New Mexico. His father was the city manager. So as years went on and we started doing more recreation and going out and about, it became, we would go visit Conchas Reservoir every summer, quite frequently, because his brother-in-law had one of the houseboats out there. And it was an easy place to stay, and we had quite a bit of fun. But we would, high school and college, early 70s, or late 70s, early 80s, would go out there and enjoy the lake. One of the things we would do is we would break in the afternoon and be hot, but we would like to get on canoes and actually canoe up as far reaches of the rivers, both on the Conchas side and the Canadian side. And you've got the cliffs. And one of the favorite things we would do is we'd go and seek the petroglyphs that the Native Americans had etched into the stone of these cliffs. And if the lake was down any particular summer, you could find more petroglyphs that have been buried by the water. And that was something that was unique, and you just didn't experience every day at any typical lake that I had previously experienced in other parts of the United States.
The dam itself and those houses just this year became part of a National Historic Site. They received that designation, and those houses are real adobe. You know, they aren't frame construction. They're those real adobes that were used in the construction of the construction site that you were talking about earlier. And they're just beautiful buildings and a beautiful location there on the bluff overlooking the lake. And so it would have been a shame to just tear those down. So we tried to look for ways to retain those buildings, but give the public an opportunity to use them and not just government employees. So we put out a request for proposal for people who are interested in operating them as vacation lodging, and a local rancher there actually won the bid and operates them as what's called the Adobe Bell, and it's just a wonderful facility, open to the public. Anybody can call up, make reservations, and stay there, and it's just great. They'll have deer eating out of their yards, and it's known for a really great birding area also, so it's just a lovely site.
Besides birding, the lake offers camping, water skiing, swimming, bicycling, fishing, boating in any style of craft you can imagine, and anything you can think of that's fun and legal to do outdoors on any day of the year. This Odin Hullenkremer mural a WPA Federal Art Project painting, which hangs in the administration building of the dam along with a companion piece painted of the construction town, do a fine job of representing the skill and spirit that built Conchas Dam. The mural pictorially tells the story of the beginning of a project, a 5-year project that put hungry people to work and gave them badly needed skills. A project that introduced some of the very first Spanish Pueblo revival-style government buildings to New Mexico. A project that made the dryland farms of Tucumcari bloom and gave the Mesa lands a wonderful water playground. A project that stopped the floods of 1941 and 42 and filled the lake, saving the water that would have run away downstream. The dam, dikes, and the lake that this project built are a tribute to the skill of the Army Corps of Engineers, the political courage of a New Deal president and governor, and the spirit of New Mexicans who survived and thrived in hard times.